fucking wild. You know, and like you could do whatever you wanted pretty much all the time. I would go to the Packard plant like once a week and spend like all day in there like painting. You know, like that's where the fuck can you do that? Nowhere I've lived in this country. You know, when Duggan came in. I mean, like slowly, but it's like that's the factor that changed. I mean, one of the first things he did when he came in was hired like, I don't know the exact numbers, but like 10,000 more fucking cops. You know, like right away. Pretty close. I mean, that's what you do. I mean, that's how that shit works. Is like you want to clear out the neighborhood so your people can come in. You fucking send out the cops and start busting people for bullshit. 3 years ago, even you would never see a speed trap, and now they're fucking everywhere. You know, like where they're waiting for people who are speeding or like traffic violation shit. They did not care at all. That's why like the Detroit stop. It's like a tradition. Like when my mom's in town, she's always stopping at yellow lights, and I'm like, you're gonna get fucking rear-ended. Like you need to go.
Now it's time to toast the tone, making needs, keeping cheese, smoking blunts, pushing keys for real. My nigga pull the trigger, Chris's ass, making these bumping jumps on your ass. Treat these bitches just like trash. Real niggas stay around. Trading babies never last. Flipping a player all in one. Mind games never fail. Never underestimate this pimping, cause I'm raising hell. Been a vampology, a real player gotta go, but I'm just letting you know, loco ain't going for the 9-4.
Play like a lunatic, minty dog on the pivot roll. Like got it sold up for that folk on your motherfucking dog that hoe. Done that 3 to play that, my little minty dog gon' come out hard. You talk like shoot pistols, my nigga throwing the fucking ball. In the mega drink, pretty is pretty, bitch. But that 3 I play around, but that fuck.
That was one of the most fun buildings in the city, dude. Shit. What happened there? They boarded it up. It's sealed. What? I had a big fucking pain in the
Damn, niggas quick. It's to tell these bitches, Princess Loco.
Motherfucking 94 hoes get they sub pop. Model for the 9 quad. Get this fucking knowledge drop. To you bitches flanking, perpetrating off a player staff. Real shit, too slick. The logo has no alibi. If I'm hit so fucking hard, you hoes is Jay. You cannot fuck with this lady neck in the black. Hit the track and sell my crack. Keep a low profile because these bitches be behind your back. Talk that shit, but weak as hell and smile up in your fucking face. Plotting to the next nigga, how they can get my fame erased. Just can't stand to see a nigga be on top and make some deals.
Detroit is Detroit, and I think that there are people, there is white investment and like big investment that's coming in because there are really in the scheme of real estate in the United States, really affordable opportunities for people to get in and get invested. And Detroit is a historic city, so there's really interesting architecture. We've got and so because of those reasons, it's like lucrative for people to come back. But the city of Detroit is culturally its own, and I think that too often the story is focused on these new developments that are happening in downtown, or people like me, like a white farmer gets the interview instead of a black farmer, and farming has been happening in the city for a really long time. And I think that people need to be aware of that and have I think it's really important that people who are conducting interviews and coming to the city to learn about the city are making sure that they get the real story of the city. It's more complex than that. So this is Coriander Kitchen and Farm, and we have an acre of land, a half acre over here that's under production, and then another half acre across the street that we're working on getting under production. Most of what we grow is for ourselves, and we use it in catering, and we'll use it at our restaurant when it's open. We're in construction right now, and then we sell to other restaurants throughout the city. It does not look like anywhere else in the world. I mean, there are other cities that had Rust Belt cities that had a lot of challenges in their times, but the specific combination of economics, race, and the fluctuation of economy, I feel like Detroit is very, very unique. And I will say that I don't know how many cities, metropolitan cities in the United States, I could afford to own land, farm it, and live here. So the cost benefit of that is pretty cool. But what's exciting to me is that the opportunity then for us to create local ecosystem, local economy, and sustainability within this thing where we're growing things and selling them to our neighbors and and restaurants in the city. And so I think that it's unique in that sense. Detroit is a really interesting place to live when you've lived in other places in the United States. And so there was a lot of me just getting used to being in this place. There is corruption, but what politician is there not? I do think it's something that's a problem in the greater United States, but specifically here, that we are able to essentially, prosecute and imprison our old black mayor, who also did many corrupt things. I don't feel like we saw as many tangible benefits from his time in office, but I could be totally, I was just moving to the city at that time, so.
No, nobody's that progressive. Yeah, I think like everybody's about like, oh, jobs, dollars, and leaving out, the people who don't fit into those categories so easily that, so that's a problem. That would require like city leaders to be more sensitive or woke to like justice issues or something. I don't think it's possible in today's political climate. Her job is just to like give people tickets if they leave their trash can out or put it out too early, or if there's a mess in front of their house or something, and evict people. Like they've evicted a 75-year-old woman from a house she had been squatting in for like 26 years or something, and just put her out, put all her stuff in dumpsters. What I'm talking about, that these big developers don't seem to be wanting to include the current residents so much in terms of their jobs or development programs. I think it doesn't take into account the existing population's needs, abilities, or desires for what they want. And yes, I think it ultimately people are being forced out, because the developers just are not finding a way to include them, and the city is not finding a way to support them. Certainly the African American community is a treasure here that should be more celebrated and supported, and has made tremendous contributions to the artistic life here, as well as broader addressing of social justice issues. And there's been a lot, of course, of cross-pollinating between the social justice people and artists in the city over the years, and that's an important legacy that should be celebrated, preserved, supported, all that. New mayor, new all that.
So our trash service is privatized now. Are the people who come, because there's a lot of acreage that has to be mowed and maintained that the city owns. Many of these things are becoming privatized because the city can't afford it in its own books. But ultimately, privatization is more expensive, and it also, I feel like, takes away the autonomy of the city to manage and control and really know what's going on in its own place. So I don't think it's a good thing. But I'm not really sure what the answer is, because there's a lack of money. And so this is the other issue, is that like having the new investment from New Detroit and wealthier people coming in and spending money, and us being able to get their tax money, it's beneficial for the city, because then we have more money to like do all the things in all the neighborhoods that we need to do. But it's the risk and the danger, and what is happening too often is that comes at the price of the community that's been here and who has like stuck it out through the hard times. and maybe there's not always the best implementation where you're creating spaces where old and new can come together and find equality, synergy, collaboration, and create spaces that are truly welcoming for all.
Because Detroit already had so many cultural symbols that I feel like it's kind of the opposite. That's what attracted, aside from also like the all the available space. But it's there's a lot of places in the world with available space, but this has some really amazing culture that's been going on here forever. I mean, yeah, it's definitely really unique, but there's a lot of Rust Belt cities that have beautiful old construction that's in various states of decay, or I don't know. I guess I wouldn't necessarily agree with that. There's really special things here, like we have Belle Isle, and I don't know, but it's a classic Rust Belt city.
We have space and a need for more people to come, but we also have a beautiful, rich community that's here that needs support. So I think that finding more ways that we can integrate those in a better way, it doesn't seem to be, I haven't seen it done in a way that I'm like super impressed by. But I think that we live in a country, in a nation that still suffers from systemic racism, and until we really address the roots of that, which I don't know, I mean, there are steps hopefully we can make in the meantime in creating more opportunity, and I think that it's becoming on more prevalent in people's radars, but money wins most of the time, unfortunately, and if the money is coming from white people away from the city, I don't know, it's a really complex issue. It's not good. I don't think it's good. I think that there are ways that there can be more collaborations, but I don't know. I feel like that so often the motivation for investment is the bottom line and making profit. So I think giving Detroiters more opportunity to be educated and access to the various processes in which you can acquire land or acquire these resources that then can be something that their family can inherit, that can gain in its what it's valued as, so that they can earn more money one day when they sell. Like, I think that those are all steps that we can make to try to create more opportunity, but it's a challenging situation. Yeah.
I mean, one thing that's amazing here is that we've been able to keep this space, because I've lived in tons of cities, and everywhere I've gone, there's just like a perpetual closing of amazing spaces, just nonstop. Yes, it's a tragedy. So, but yeah, that's the Packard plant, which supposedly, people always say we're gonna do this big thing with it. It's just kind of slowly crumbling. But this place here used to be just covered in pallets. These walls, like where this vine has been growing. Woo. It was really cool before the leaves were in, and it was just like these cool lines. Oh look, it's a chainsaw piece. It's you can make like a big a sword out of this. Well, it's just got a lot of carbon, so it's like a really good steel for blades, I think. So years ago, I think about 10 years ago, a few people went in on this warehouse back when real estate was cheap. It was kind of this gold rush that happened here, and that's really a big part of the inspiration for my piece, is that sort of because I realized too that now that I don't think they have the game Hungry Hippos in Germany, do they? I just realized what an American cultural reference that is. Yeah. It's this game where you push the button And there's
Okay.
all these hippo heads that are trying to catch the ball. One thing that Ben works on a lot is shipping containers, like modified, to be like businesses or homes or whatever. Okay. And this one hit an overpass. This one like hit a bridge. The truck driver like smashed into an overpass. And it's gonna use it for a sculpture. This is this part.
That's an awesome bike, actually.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, this is my first aluminum tall bike.
All right. Do you have more of them?
That's the only one I have right now. I've made a lot, but I have no idea whatever happened to them. These are a couple of my pieces. So this is what I'm working on now. I'm not a very good musician.
I don't want to say Wild West, but yeah. It's hard. It's hard for me to say, because my experience only goes back to the early 1980s. So, and at that time, there was some magical times at that, because that was when the city was going from 1.5 million people, down to it's like later or now is 670,000, so at that, like in the early 80s, they were still saying, 1.5 million people, so it was the rapid flight out, The art scene is definitely growing. I think there's a lot of, there were already a lot of established kind of arts institutions, very active art community in Detroit, and there were already a lot of institutions, so that now, like, when new people come in, it really just expands the scene. It's like there's more and more is more, or whatever, shop for art in the city, and then that's kind of evaporated, and then it was just primarily the nonprofits for a while that still stayed.
What time are you talking about now?
Ranging from the 1980s until now, 2019. So,
Yeah.
but there were a number of galleries downtown or in the vicinity, stretching back even before the time when of my firsthand experience, from the 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s. I think a lot of the galleries, the economy just got worse and worse and worse. Like in Detroit, I think that's the one thing the Europeans have learned. There's always a boom and a bust and a boom and a bust and a boom and a bust. It's Detroit has been a boom town many times, and a bust, broken ass, downtrodden time. I think there was a mayor back in the 1890s or something, Hazen's Pingree, who was famous for warning residents about allowing corporations to gain too much power over the people. And it was a time of great economic distress in the city, and he was encouraging people at that time to grow their own food in their lots, because there was such an economic crisis. Now, with more people coming in, it seems like there's a lot more. Red Bull has come in, and other companies throw money at art projects, and there is some nonprofit organizations that support artists in town. So it's really had a rich art scene, really, probably for a long time, but the Detroit scene really started coming into its own in the late 60s. I think that's when more and more attention was given to Detroit artists. Yeah, misconception that it's all just the new people coming in. Although, obviously, new people coming in are bringing lots of changes that draw more new people. But I think, like, people from Detroit have always done a lot, even when there weren't so many new people moving in.
Change has been constant since I arrived here. You know, I think certainly, yeah, he's an influence. You know, he's one of these like businessman politicians. You know, and yeah, it's just like the Detroit is like a really extreme example of what happens when, you know, so many people have so much wealth and other people have so much less, and that sort of, you know, this is what happens when that takes place, you know. One thing that I feel like was one of the most, and this was way before, like in like '99, I think it was. Yeah. They privatized the school system here. Okay. And they started shutting down schools in like record amounts, you know, and that was, I feel like, one of the real, like the first, like, you know, shots fired at like pushing people out of the city, like the original inhabitants. Because obviously, you know, communities are sort of built around schools a lot, you know, it's like such an important component. Yeah, and the school closings, I mean, just, if you should look it up, it's shocking, like how many, like hundreds of schools, you know, it's crazy. Yeah. So it's like, if you can't raise a family with, you know, with a good school, it's like, you know, how does that work for families in the city?
I got you. Yeah. The choice that you need to make is, do you want good graffiti or bad graffiti? Because you're going to have graffiti, it's a given. And for the longest, Detroit was really cool because people would come here from all over the country because they knew that it was like chill to paint and they could take their time. You know, like graffiti in New York's mostly shitty because people have to work fast because of the cops. But here, for the longest, people could come spend 30 minutes painting a wall because nobody fucking cared and nobody was going to stop them. So you had a city that was like literally a museum of amazing graffiti, the whole city. And especially the Packard, you know, there are hot spots of that. There's a code, like, among graffiti writers that's generally followed, where it's like, if a wall has just a bunch of tags, like just like single outline bullshit, paint over it with a fill, you know, which is one color and then like outlined. And you can paint over it with a fill, that's totally chill. If it's got fills on it, you can paint over it with a piece, which is like multiple colors, like real elaborate, like the kind of shit you see in the Packard plant, you know? And there's a code there. You don't go backwards. You don't hit a piece with your fucking tag. Otherwise, that dude, like if you were to do that, that dude would paint over everything you had in the city. You know what I mean? Like that's how it works. It's like, and so my point was like, essentially, you don't have the enforcement capacity to eliminate graffiti. Look at New York. New York has more fucking cops per capita than any city in the world. It's covered in graffiti. Covered in it. Because Duggan aggressively hates graffiti. It's like one of his like pet peeves, you know? Like, I heard a secondhand story of somebody driving around in the car with him, and he was just like, we need to paint over this shit, like, today. I fucking hate graffiti, you know? Duggan Gray, dude. Because it's an aesthetic thing. At the end of the day, it's like, who the fuck cares if somebody's name is painted on your wall unless you think it's ugly? You know what I mean? Like, and so it's this like, and it's like this value judgment, and it's been correlated consistently with blight. And I don't think that that's valid either. You know? Like, oh, it like leads to blight, you know? And it's like, no, other way around. Like blight leads to graffiti. You know? You're not actually eliminating, and like, yeah, and then like, I don't know about you. I mean, I'm sure you agree with me. Fucking gray walls, dude. Like, really? Like, you'd rather look at some shitty gray like slop job paint job than a fucking painting? I don't care what it says. You go eat a dick with a bunch of dicks. I'd rather look at that than a sloppy ass gray wall.
I do. I mean, that's what the hippo sculpture was about. You know, it's just like this great desire for real estate in the gold rush. I was kind of describing that took place, and so yeah, I guess I would agree with that. It's still happening. I mean, there's you know, it's not completely over. You know, and there's also, I mean, the city is huge, and there's parts of it that aren't, you know, haven't been as much the focus of that. Of course, yeah, of course. I mean, that's always hugely influential in all of the different contexts. Like Berlin, I mean, it's, you know, all this amazing culture, and then, you know, people become interested in investing, and then the people, you know, who are creating culture have a difficult time to remain, you know. It's sad to think that, you know, everything's over. I mean, it's like, does this generation just have to give up or something, you know? Just okay, yeah, just everybody. Yeah. I had some, because you know, I'm interested in alternative transportation, and I had these ideas for these like really big carts that you could pull even by bicycle. We used to make them in Austin. We had these trailers that were like huge trailers that you could put a whole band on, and it's just the gears are so low, it just goes very slow. Yeah. You know, but you can pull a really heavy weight. If you had like these social centers where there would be one that was like for silk screening and one that was for, you know, for metal work, you could bring like some tanks and, you know, and just roll up on a park and just have like this like instant social center, you know. Of course. I mean, like the Hippo project was there was a developer who was in on those meetings, and it's on his land, you know, that we put this sculpture. So it's like the first time I've ever really, you know, kind of, it's like I almost sort of you know, like got in bed with the developers in order to be able to put this project in that location, you know. And that's a corner. Like now it's all under construction, it looks crazy, and you can't drive through it, you know. And 2 years from now though, it's you know, it's probably going to look like some kind of boutique kind of thing, you know, which I think it'll you know, as weird as it'll be to like see everything transform, it's really it's interesting to see the hippos with that like kind of happening in the background. I really want to figure out a way to do a time lapse of that, you know, or even just maybe even just go take a picture every week or something, you know.
In the next 5 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a good idea. It would be simpler than setting up a whole system, you know.
The other thing that happened in kind of together with increased buffing, like great painting, was the city arresting known graffiti dudes and throwing the fucking book at them. There's a kid in Southwest who's homeless now, who was a really good artist, and he fucking, with this other dude who's really cool, like they went up on a water tower in Highland Park, was abandoned, and they fucking tagged Free the Water on it, like huge, and you could see it from like all the highways, and they got fucking caught, and the city dragged them through court for like 2 years. It cost them a ton of money, even though they didn't get charged with shit. At the end of the day, the city was threatening to like give them like 20 years in jail. And the whole process of like going through trial and shit broke one of those kids. Like he's like all fucking strung out on the street now, like straight up, you know. And he was like super smart, like really sick artist kid. And it's like literally being dragged through that court process, like just. He couldn't handle it, you know, broke him as a person. It's fucked, dude.
Yeah, people like have an idea. What is Detroit? There's already an idea in their mind, you know. Some people have a good idea, some people have a bad idea, depending on who they talk to or who they believe. And but I've hosted lots of people who like this was like their lifelong dream to come to Detroit or whatever. But, you know, I'm sure there's lots of parties that happen that I don't know about, and they might be awesome too. You know, it's just, I think it's a little bit of a different vibe now. It's a little bit more controlled. Underground party spots that had art shows or art shows that crossed over into music and other fun stuff. Then it was the music and the arts were like hand in hand. Techno and art. It's artists who their destination is Detroit. So yeah, Detroit, it is a destination. I would hate to see that it made into an advertising slogan. I think there's like more and more like empty nester people downtown who also are buying art and spending money on art and living in the renovated skyscrapers and all that. Those people are buying art too. I mean, so yeah, some of the new developers are wrapping artists around their new projects and helping to support art projects. I think it's generally good. I think artists are getting paid. Local artists are getting paid. Local artists are getting to make more large-scale works and get their work more widely seen. So, but whether that is going to be sustained or how that develops in the future remains to be seen, but it's not all bad for sure. There's a lot of good artists and art programs that do get supported by some of these new people. I think, you know, the fault is where like there's a lot of developers in Detroit who don't involve the artists at all. Like they do things that affect the quality of life in areas where artists have historically lived, and like it's, you know, in terms of demolishing buildings or clearing out neighborhoods and or gentrifying areas, you know, and like I think for those people, like the artists are not on the radar at all. They're not using the artists. I think the developers who are using the artists are generally doing okay. They tend to surround themselves with people who are genuine and have good taste, I suppose you could say, and you know, or there's like budgets to work with to pay people to like install artwork. I mean, there's still a lot of people out there like hustling, doing their other, you know, their own thing, like without being involved with those people per se. You know, maybe as they move up the ranks, you know, I know. So at the moment, there's a lot of diversity in terms of, you know, the economics. You know, there should be more money in the, you know, flowing to Detroit artists, but there are other sources. There's some grants and other programs that help artists out here too.
I think I told you the story of the Banksy. You know about that shit? So there's a building up the street here on fucking Warren. There's like huge building, and then like some sculptures and a weird fence, and then like this house that they just added a third story onto. And it's this gallery, 555 gallery, that's like notoriously scummy. They're like known in the city for being fucking scumbags. Like nobody really, like, a lot of times I'll bring it up to like people who know what's up, and they're like, oh yeah, those guys fucked me like this one time, you know? Just like everybody's got a story with those dudes. 4 or 5 years ago, maybe more. Banksy came here, right? He did a painting in the Packard, and right after it went down, 555 gallery goes in there with fucking jackhammers, takes the whole wall. And everybody's like, yo, what the fuck are you guys doing? Like, that's fucked. And they're like, no, we'll never sell it. We're just trying to preserve it, blah, blah, blah. Like, somebody else is going to paint over it, or somebody else is going to take it if we don't, blah, 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 blah. They sit on it for 2 years. 2 years later, front cover of the LA art auction. $1.6 million. And then it's like, oh wow, we just bought a huge building on fucking Warren, like 5 blocks away from Midtown. I wonder how we afforded that. Like, you fucks, dude. Like, unbelievable. Just the audacity of that is unbelievable.
I mean, there's been some artists that have like come through Detroit when I was here, while I've been here, you know, who are like really blown up international and collected in museums and doing shows all over the world. And it's like, it's crazy. I went to Art Basel, you know, and it's just like the crass commercialization. Everybody's just worried about like how much it's going to be worth next, and that, you know, that takes the joy out of art, I think, for sure, when it's seen strictly for its investment value, you know, and when like the artists are no longer really making the money, it's just the dealers. I think, like most big American cities, there's corruption in people in power, and I think Detroit is no exception. And yeah, so I think his system favors, you know, his buddies, yeah. And they look at it, you know, I mean, it looks great down there, downtown. And compared to how it did a few years ago, it's bringing more people in to have the this new regime. More money.
The reality is that most of the people here in the art scene are like transient. I feel like there's kind of like a freak track between here and New Orleans. Like a lot of people that I know here particularly who are like successful artists are like bouncing between here and New Orleans and like other places all the time, you know.
Right.
But like home base is generally New Orleans, and then here's like a second home base. And a lot of those people have left now because it's not as fun as it was, you know. And New Orleans is apparently still fun as shit. It's super similar, yeah, for sure. Mostly black, mostly super poor, no city services. You know, the classic narrative of the black, like of the urban core of America, and super segregated too.
Yeah.
And shit's not as cheap as here, but it's cheap, like for property and whatever. Rent and shit. Yeah. Well, and not to mention that after the flooding happened, the city used it as an excuse to try and redevelop huge swaths of the city. They tore down, like they literally, on multiple occasions, they tore down massive affordable housing complexes that did not have any damage from the flood, were not even touched by the flood, tore them down and replaced them with upper middle bracket housing. Like, consistent. And sweetheart deals to developers, like the same shit. You know, I've read some shit that like conflated Katrina and the bankruptcy. It's this whole disaster capitalism model. The bankruptcy was the disaster here. Katrina was the disaster there. But there's a model for that happens a lot now. It's like a recent model, I feel like, where people are like, politicians use disasters as a way to push through a broader agenda that they wanted to do for a long time. It's like, oh, it's a disaster, we got to do all these things, and nobody's really paying attention to what they're actually doing because there's so many moving parts and shit. And so they use that as a excuse to get whatever policy they've been sitting on in their back pocket they want to get through, you know. So Mercedes took pictures of the new what's it called, the G-Wagon. Took pictures of the G-Wagon in front of a couple murals in Eastern Market. Put them on Instagram. You know, like real pro quality photos, like Met drop in Detroit, you know, typical fucking shit. They didn't credit the artist. They didn't ask for permission from the artist. So one of the artists wrote them a letter that was just like, hey, like, it's kind of fucked up you use our shit without asking for permission. We're compensating us because you're a fucking multi-billion-dollar company. And Mercedes' response was to sue all three of the artists. All right. And now they're getting dragged through court. But yeah, one of the paintings was his. So all three of these dudes are getting dragged through court by Mercedes. They didn't even do shit but write a fucking letter. Fuck. But Mercedes was, you know, I think Mercedes was thinking like, oh, these guys are going to sue us, you know, so we better sue them first. Yeah, I had an idea, which is if Detroit really wants to generate revenue, they should trademark the name Detroit. And anybody in the suburbs, anybody globally who wants to use Detroit, if they're not based in Detroit, they have to pay to use the fucking name. Pay the city to use the name. Like, that's what New York does, right? And that, yeah, I don't know. Because that's totally a thing also. And you look at Ford in particular, Ford and GM, I mean, they tout Detroit in their advertising materials, but they're pulling out of the city in a big way. You know, Ford just committed to that, to buying the station in Corktown. But like, that's all white collar shit. You know, GM's closing their plant in Hamtramck.
Unfortunately, it kind of does. I mean, you know, I think that the investment follows the art scene. Obviously, you know, it's kind of like a classic cycle now. You know, and that's something that I was more focused on when I first got here. I did a lot of mural projects and graphics, and you know, just like projects with youth. The first year I came, we made these silk screens that were like 4 by 6 feet, like 2 by 3 meters.
Okay.
And then we painted them on. I mean, we silk screened onto paper and wheat pasted them around town, and it was sort of about like it was talking about how, you know, Detroit at the time had this really negative, you know, and I think it still does to an extent, you know, like, oh, watch out, you know, like, so we were trying to challenge they were challenging the narrative of that, you know, with their artwork. But I've also known people to, you know, put the artwork in the alley, put the mural in the alley so that you don't see it on the street, so it still looks like a bleak kind of empty street. You see what I mean? You know, so I've known people here to sort of deliberately, you know, do like the big artwork, but do it in kind of more of a private way. Yeah. Okay. So it's not like, what's happening here? Like, maybe we should
move here.
I don't know. I mean, I only know as far as when I got here in 2010. Yeah. And I know that I am part of like a wave of people. Yeah. You know, I wouldn't say it's like the first or second or third, or you know, because I'm not sure what was happening, you know, before that. You know, I'm sure there were changes taking place. Yeah. Change is the only constant, right? So it seems almost a little arrogant to say like I'm a first wave gentrifier or something. You know what I mean? But yeah, I love that the artwork that I do, like the animals, and you know it's all stuff that people. It's not like some sort of high concept art that it's hard to understand. It's just like very direct, and people can get in it and pedal it around. Use and it. Exactly, yeah. So I just love that working on things that are, you know, that people can experience with their bodies, and you know. And I think that Detroit, one of the things I love about Detroit is I love to just, you know, like take my animals through the neighborhood, and people always have, you know, like the best reaction, you know. Yeah. But you know, or in some places it's like they'll see something weird and they just won't really care. There's like a kind of feast and famine of opportunities, you know. Sometimes it's hard to find. Sometimes it's really, you know, there's a lot to do. It's so. Yeah. That's not completely true, but it's definitely not balanced. Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of Black entrepreneurs here that are making moves, you know, and from, you know, large scale people to like just like the whole like Detroit hustles harder thing is so real here. Like I used to think branding, you know, the idea of branding, like I used to think it was like this kind of stupid corporate idea, but here individuals have their own brand, and they, and it's like this survival tactic. It's like this like really, it really like changed the way I looked at that.
Okay.
I mean, I think that there is some overlap, but I think at the same time there's these sort of parallel worlds that are happening here.
Okay.
Where it's like
Through segregation.
It's like it's not through. I mean, I guess it is probably through systemic, but also just from sort of, like how to put it, like just like different parallel worlds that don't necessarily always connect with each other.
Okay.
It's not just on a day-to-day level.
And they, it's like Ford and GM both used to like sponsor Jazz Fest, and like shit like that, and they don't do any of that shit anymore. The only sponsor of Jazz Fest now is Quicken Loans. Fucking sucks now. I was so disappointed last year. I got kicked off the sidewalk 4 times by the police trying to listen to Herbie Hancock because they closed all of the, like, it used to be a setup with like bleachers for the public and like this whole area where the public could stand. They took all that shit down, made all the seating VIP, so you had to buy a ticket to go in there. And so it's like, dude, this is a public festival. There were like 2,000 people with nowhere to be. Because every space that used to be available to them was gone. And it's like, dude, like, and the cops were out there kicking people off the sidewalk. And I told the cop, like, the 3rd time, I'm like, I'm coming right back here. Like, you can keep kicking me off and wasting your time, but I can't see the music otherwise, and this is a fucking public festival, dude. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, talk to the organizer of this thing, because this is, like, it's nothing to do with us, Yeah, man. And I'm probably not even going to go this year, and that was one of my favorite things about the city, man. Because the other thing is there was always a stage that was all Detroit. Like, only Detroit bands on one of the stages all the time. And, there would be, I didn't care about what was going on at the other stages. I just wandered down there. Some of the sickest shit I saw there every fucking year was at that Detroit stage. When Quicken Loans became the only sponsor, the Detroit stage is now fucking, like, young, cute, white girls singing vocal jazz. The same fucking stage, and it's like, you guys are sick. You don't see the problem here? Like, you know what I mean? Like, what the fuck? I was so mad about that last year. And it's like, the lineup this year is so fucking white bread. There isn't a single dude who, like, has released anything that's not smooth in, like, the last fucking 25 years. Like, legitimately, it's all just, like, the fucking softest jazz. And it's like, there are so many, like, legit, amazing, like, innovators in the world of jazz who live in the fucking city. But, oh no, that music's like too threatening. It's too African. Man. Those motherfuckers, man. Dan Gilbert's, he's a plague on this town. He's a fucking human plague. He is the worst. Not the worst, actually. They're all really bad. All of the millionaires who are, like, doing shit here are really fucking terrible.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
man, it's like this guy just bought a whole bunch of Eastern Market.
Yeah.
And, now, like, the karate school's gone, the ice cream shop's gone, the deli, just all these things that you would go to, because Eastern Market was, like, a place you'd go on the weekend and just walk around, and, you know what I mean? And now so much of that is like, all those things are disappearing, and that's really like the flavor of a place, so when that starts to just get more and more homogenized, we just lose, it's like a loss of culture. Do I feel bad about it? I mean, I don't want to let myself just feel like defeated, and I think, like, I'm also obviously like putting this sculpture in a new development, like I'm looking, for some kind of opportunities in it, but I also think it's it's hard to it's hard to make it work out.
So
I'm happy I'm happy that I feel like the sculpture I did is sort of like a jab at that sort of change, you know. So
definitely, yeah.
that's something that feels really good, you know.
Yeah.
It's like at this very moment I feel, you know, I feel happy that you know that got to happen.
Have you seen the whole thing about the Illiches and the district? So, you know, they built that Little Caesars arena for hockey and something else. The city footed half the bill for that arena. The only thing they got on the back end... Oh, yeah. So the city footed half the bill for that arena. And everything that happens in that arena is not taxable. No, not even fucking sales tax, not even liquor tax, nothing. The city of Detroit does not see a dime from anything that happens inside that building. The state of Michigan does not see a dime from anything that happens inside that building. Nothing. Fucking goose egg. Which is, in the first place, is insane. Just from a business perspective, like a basic business perspective, you pay for half of a thing and you don't see a single fucking return from it? Are you crazy? Like, that's a bad deal. Like, anybody can see that. The only requirement that was placed on the developers as a result of receiving that funding from the city was that 50% of the employees there had to live in Detroit. That was the only requirement. But there is no person or agency in the city who is responsible for making sure that that happens. There was an independent study, because they did the same thing at Tiger Stadium. They paid for a bunch of it and were like, you have to hire X amount of Detroiters. There was an independent study that somebody did there of the employees. Less than 10% lived in the city. Because no one's fucking enforcing it. The one caveat. Okay, so that's the stadium. The other promise, which is a handshake deal from the Illiches, was that they were going to develop that whole neighborhood around the stadium. You know what they've built in the 3 years it's been? Parking lots. That's it. But if you go down, like, off of Woodward from that, there's boarded up buildings that the fucking Illiches own. That they already tried to tear down to turn into parking lots, and I forget who it was, but somebody shut them down on the context, like, they were like, no, these are historic buildings, you can't tear these down and build a parking lot, like, and they made all these promises when that stadium was built, that they would revitalize that whole area. They had this fancy, flashy plan, they bought all these fucking buildings, they bought the whole area around it, and 3 years later, they haven't done shit. Not a single thing. They built like 2 parking lots. That's it. Not even started construction on anything. Because it was a handshake deal. They have no obligation. Why the fuck would they do that? And it's like, what? And then, you know, the whole stadium thing is so inane, too. It's like, who the fuck buys that argument that a stadium is going to cause revitalization? Like, that's insane. That's an insane thing to believe. Because you watch what happens. Go down there when there's a game. Motherfuckers come down. They go in the stadium. They leave. They throw their fucking trash on the street. They drive away. That's it. That's all that they do. Maybe they go to a bar and have a beer and a fucking burger. But, like, that's not helping anybody. You know? Like, oh, cool. They're going to a sports bar. Like, whoop-de-fucking-do. So the city made $3 in revenue off of those people. Cost more to pick up their trash. You know? Like, the math doesn't add up at all. And it's like, who the fuck wants to live next to a stadium also? Like, oh, I can't leave my house tonight. Oh, I can't park anywhere near my apartment because there's millions of fucking people parked everywhere and it's a fucking zoo. Like, oh, I gotta pay $10 to park to go eat. I had an idea for an app that's like, it's just like there's no actual app, it's just the icon. And when there's a game downtown, it's red. And when there's not a game downtown, it's green. And that's the whole app.
It will fit.
Yeah, if I knew how to make an app, it would already be done because I think it's a great idea, but I have no clue how to make an app, and I'm not trying to learn.
There's a distant place you can just find your way. Everything you like, singing like a song. So sing along, but where do you go when you're on the road? Where do you go when you're on the road? Now you to decide to keep the dream alive. You ask yourself, is it a dream or just a lie? 'Cause you know what they say, careful what you chase. When all you really want is presence of mind. All the time, but where do you go when you're on the road? Where you gonna go when you're on the road? Where do you go, where do you go? Come on. Where do you go? Where do you go? Where you gonna go?
Before it catches that fire.
Birthday
Oh
bowl.
shit! That.
Come on, Ty!
Get in there! Get in there! That was like